Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mia, and this is my debut. Thank you. Thank you.
Did China meddle in the last two Canadian federal elections?
Interfere in Canada's federal elections.
Meddling by China in Canadian elections.
Chinese interference in Canada's 2019 federal election.
Alleged Chinese interference in the 2019 election.
Welcome to Canada, eh? First off, welcome to the nation's capital, home of the first beaver tail stand, Parliament Hill, and the convoy. Yay! Today's topic is Chinese interference in the Canadian elections. Who knew? Most of Canadians knew, actually. There have been allegations of Chinese interference in the 2019 and 2021 Canadian federal elections.
The Globe and Mail says the story is based on secret documents from CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. The newspaper says they show that China employed a sophisticated strategy to influence the vote. Now, CBC News has not seen these documents, but the Globe report says the documents suggest that China had two clear goals: to ensure a minority Liberal government was elected and to defeat certain Conservative candidates.
Now, you might be asking, why the do we have two federal elections in 2 years? It has to do with Canadian politics. In this country, prime ministers get 4 years a term, like presidents do, but they can call an election at any time. The Liberals had a minority government, and they really wanted to get a majority. After 2 years, Justin Trudeau called another federal election in order to get a majority. Guess what? We got another minority government. Most people were drained politically and economically from the pandemic, so the Chinese government would prefer it if the Canadian government was a minority Liberal government, because that way, one, it's harder to get things passed in Parliament, so it's harder to get things done politically. Two, the Liberals are seen to be more friendly to Chinese aggression. The CCP has said that if they were to annex Taiwan or to commit further genocide and war crimes against the weaker population, that the Liberals would be less inclined to make drastic moves against China. The Chinese government doesn't want the Conservatives in power because Conservatives are seen to be more hard on communism.
Oh, baby, how was I supposed to know that something wasn't right here? Oh, baby, I shouldn't let you go.
To this date, we don't know how much of a role the CCP played in getting the Liberals a minority government once again, but we do know that it happened. In late 2022, Global News reported on a suspected attempt by the People's Republic of China to infiltrate the Parliament of Canada by funding a network of candidates to run in the country's 2019 federal election. Trudeau was warned by CSIS that China had a sophisticated operation intended to influence the 2019 and 2021 vote. Candidates allegedly received money from Chinese consulate members, totaling up to nearly $250,000.
Separate sources with knowledge of the 2022 intelligence briefs told Global News funds from the Chinese consulate in Toronto, allegedly facilitated by a Toronto businessman, Wei Cheng-yi, totaling some $250,000, was transferred first to an unnamed Ontario MPP and a federal candidate staff member. Wei Cheng-yi denies the allegations. From there, sources say the money was distributed to members of a clandestine network. Intelligence says the network was comprised of at least 11 federal candidates, along with 13 campaign staffers. According to the intelligence, some are wittingly affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party, some are not.
Recently, the Globe and Mail broke a story. They published a opinion piece from a whistleblower who works in the national security. They're not going to release the name. It's confidential because if this person gets found out, they could either be fired or serve jail time, depending on the severity of their breach against the Security Act, basically, that everyone is sworn into when you start with the national service in Canada. I'm just going to read you guys a couple excerpts from an opinion piece that was published in the Globe and Mail from a confidential whistleblower in what I'm assuming working for CSIS, which is the Canadian Security Intelligence Service.
When I first became aware of the significance of the threat posed by outside interference to our democratic institutions, I worked, as have many unnamed and tireless colleagues, to equip our leaders with the knowledge and the tools needed to take action against it. Months passed, and then years. The threat grew in urgency. Serious action remained unforthcoming. I endeavored, alone and with others, to raise concerns about this threat directly to those in a position to hold our top officials to account. Regrettably, those individuals were unable to do so. In the time that passed, another federal election had come and gone. The threat of interference had grown, and it had become increasingly clear that no serious action was being considered. Worse still, evidence of senior public officials ignoring interference was beginning to mount. For me, the answer to these questions was found in weighing them against the public interest. I do not believe that foreign interference dictated the present composition of our federal government, nor do I believe that any of our elected leaders is a traitor to our country. Nonetheless, the growing impact of foreign interference on our ability to enjoy a free and fair political process is undeniable. Will these revelations give some Canadians cause to question the integrity of our democratic institutions and processes? Yes, they well might. With that said, we must all recognize that this is not a partisan issue, nor is this a China issue. Your fellow progressive Canadians, your fellow conservative Canadians, and your fellow Chinese Canadians are all just that, Canadians. In having this conversation, we must resist the reflex to reduce the challenge that faces us to one of us versus them.
It doesn't seem like this person made this choice lightly. I read the whole thing a few times, and they are struggling because they're breaking an oath that they made for secrecy by blowing the whistle, but they're also sticking to themselves and what they think they're doing is right. There's a person in our government that feels this strongly that they have to risk everything to get the truth out there. Their job, their career, their financial stability, their family. This must mean that this is huge. The interference reportedly included Chinese government funding of at least 11 candidates in the Canadian federal government, 9 of which were identified as liberals and 2 as conservatives, who are seen as friendly to the regime. We don't know who these people are, except one of them, which is a liberal MP by the name of Han Dong.
I just got to ask you, has the People's Republic of China played a role in your nomination, your election, since you replaced Mr. Tang?
Look, the answer is no, absolutely not. I represent a very diverse riding. Look at my supporters. There are leaders from the Iranian community, from Armenian community, South Asian community, whole range of them. I've never been offered, nor would I accept, help from a foreign country or representative from a foreign country. So the answer is absolutely not.
He vehemently denies that he accepted any money from the Chinese government, but it has been reported by our top intelligence agencies, by Global News, and by a whistleblower that this man accepted money from the Chinese government so that he could make choices in the future that are friendly to China. And he was elected. Now, Justin Trudeau has claimed that he never heard about any foreign interference or any people being bribed or paid off within the Canadian government. He was never briefed on this. He was never informed.
I can confirm that I have never gotten any information from any of our security agencies or police officers or intelligence officials or public servants on anyone receiving, as a federal candidate, receiving money from China, as the allegations highlighted.
I never got briefings on candidates receiving money from China.
Trudeau claims that they have this interference under control, and they don't believe that it had any bearing on the outcome of the election.
Canadians can be reassured that the integrity of our elections was not compromised.
The 4-page June 2017 memo asserted that senior intelligence officials had well-documented evidence of China's efforts to infiltrate all levels of government, and goes on to allege that there is a substantial body of evidence that Chinese officials are actively pursuing a strategy of engagement to influence Canadian officials in a way that can compromise the security of Canada and the integrity of Canadian institutions.
I never
Trudeau has been accused of covering this up and lying to Canadians about knowing about the interference. Some politicians, notably the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, accuses Trudeau of ignoring the election interference because it benefited him.
Justin Trudeau knew about this interference, and he covered it up because he benefited from it. He is perfectly happy to let a foreign authoritarian government interfere in our elections as long as they're helping him. And according to the Globe and Mail story today, this foreign authoritarian government wanted to see Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister because they knew that he would work for their interests rather than Canada's interest. And that's why he's covered up this information for so long.
There's actually an inquiry going on right now to figure that out, and I hope to be making another video whenever that happens so we can figure out who was at fault here, how long did we know, who knew, why didn't we do something about it, and what can we do about it to prevent this from happening again. They hired David Johnston, who used to be the Governor General of Canada under Stephen Harper, who was a Conservative leader. Governor General is the closest contact to the Crown in England because we are part of the Commonwealth. So, after weeks of resisting pressure from all sides, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has ordered 2 probes into the Chinese election interference.
He'll now have the power to call for a public inquiry, something the opposition has been asking for. David Cochrane, host of Power and Politics, is here to put it all in perspective. So, David, first off, why David Johnston?
Well, look, he's well known, he's well respected, and perhaps most importantly politically, he's been appointed to 2 key roles by former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I mean, most notably as Governor General. So he's well known, he's got experience with inquiries, and as Governor General, Adrian, he would have received national security briefings, so he's familiar with that. You stack that on top of a career as a law professor and as an academic leader, and the Liberals say this makes David Johnston an unimpeachable choice, to use their words.
All right, so let's look at the Prime Minister for a moment, because he's been under pressure, obviously, to call a public inquiry. He instead chose to appoint Johnston and leave that decision with him. So how is the opposition reacting to that?
Well, the New Democrats say they're content. They want an inquiry, but they're okay with this choice. They want to see that if Johnston will actually pull the trigger on an inquiry and just how broad and powerful his mandate and terms of reference are going to be. The Conservatives, who also want an inquiry, they are not happy. David Johnston is a member of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, and this is something the Conservatives have seized upon, calling him a Trudeau Foundation insider and casting doubts on his ability to do this job.
Now, they are having Trudeau's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, testifying at the committee about the Chinese government interference, so that's coming up soon. So we should be learning more from her.
She is a critical witness to get to the heart of the scandal, which is what did the Prime Minister know? When did he know about it? And what did he do or fail to do about Beijing's interference in our elections?
After the story was broken, Trudeau did accuse China of interfering in our elections, and this is what the response was to that.
The relationship between countries can only be built on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit, and China-Canada relations are no exception. Canada should stop making remarks that are detrimental to China-Canada relations. China is not interested in Canada's international affairs.
He seems like he would be great at parties. This is a quote from China's former Consul General in Vancouver, Tong Xiaoling, and she, quote, likes it when the parties in Parliament are fighting with each other, whereas if there is a majority, the party in power can easily implement policies that do not favor the PRC. The Chinese diplomats and their proxies were encouraged by the government back in China to press home that the Conservative Party was too critical of China and that if they were elected, it would follow the lead of former US President Trump and ban Chinese students from certain universities or education programs in Canada. This is a quote from the Chinese consulate. This will threaten the future of the voters' children, as it will limit their education opportunities. Another quote, the Liberal Party of Canada is becoming the only party that the PRC can support. A key part of their interference operation is to influence vulnerable Chinese immigrants in Canada. The intelligence reports, quote, an unnamed Chinese consulate official as saying, it's easy to influence Chinese immigrants on PRC's stance. Ew. Does that not make your skin crawl a little bit? Like the way the PRC infantilizes its citizens? Anyway, some conservative MPs have alleged that they lost the election because of interference. A few of their ploys include spreading propaganda on Chinese social medias like WeChat. Anything that's posted on WeChat has to be sanctioned by the CCP, where they posted untrue or exaggerated statements about current sitting MPs. One example being Kenny Chu, who is a Canadian Chinese immigrant from Hong Kong. He was a sitting Conservative MP projected to win the 2019 municipal election in Vancouver, and he actually lost to Han Dong, who allegedly accepted money from the People's Republic of China.
That's very concerning. I know, Kenny, to you, a lot of this doesn't come as a surprise. You have long alleged that the reason why you lost the election was due to Chinese interference in your riding. What was your experience with that?
Well, Mercedes, I just want to have a minor correction of what you said. I've been saying that the Chinese interference is a contributing factor to my loss. You can never decide whether it's an exclusive reason or not. What I've experienced here locally is that within a very short period of time, less than 2 years, supporters of mine all of a sudden becomes very angry and emotional to me personally, and they would shut the door behind in front of my face, and they would used to plant lawn signs supporting me, and they would tell me that they don't even want to vote for me, and all the difference is just within 22 months of time, and it's all because of information that are being circulated among them in WeChat and also WhatsApp that somehow convince them that I'm anti-Chinese, that I'm a racist, that I'm anti-China.
Especially the fact that they accused a Chinese Canadian of being anti-Chinese is very interesting. Apparently this was quite widespread. And another thing that really worries me about this is how much it will affect Chinese Canadians just living their lives. We've already seen an increase in anti-Asian hate, racism, discrimination. I've seen it for myself, and I can only imagine that this new revelation that China has meddled in our elections is going to turn into an us versus them narrative, and that's not at all what I want to see.
As one of the first diverse women elected to council,
I would hate for something like this to set back the progress we have made.
She's worried about how claims China interfered in Canada's elections may reflect on her and other Chinese Canadians.
If there is this misconception that you're somehow being controlled by some foreign government, then there's less chance of winning.
So you might be wondering, what credentials do I have to teach you about international affairs and political interference? Nothing. None, actually. I'm just a professional news watcher, you might say. But I thought instead of doing what I always do, which is watch the news and then talk people's ears off at work and at the bar and at home, I figured I would make a YouTube channel and hopefully find like-minded people who want to discuss. And I want to talk about a lot of things with this channel, but I do want to focus a lot of it on Canadian politics because obviously I'm Canadian. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to follow Canadian politics, but it's boring jargon that I have to shift through in order to actually get to the meat and potatoes. I just want to make it easier for people like me to understand what the is going on in Canada right now, because let me tell you folks, it's wild, crazy. It's stark raving mad, bonkers. So that's all I have for now. Be nice to yourselves. I challenge you to compliment one person on their hair or their shirt or their shoes or their smile. So compliment someone you see and be nice to everyone and tip your servers. You have no idea how hard this dress was to get on because of this. I broke my shoulder, so I really wanted to go all out and do my hair some kind of red thing to fit the theme, but I can't reach my head, so sorry. Capitalism, more like crapitalism, am I right, ladies? And that's a quote from Karl Marx.